A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, powered by the OBBM network. Hey, welcome, Sam. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy President's Day. I know it's a holiday for a lot of people.
Yeah, we just need a president. So.
Hey, you said that. Yes. Yes, we do. That's a whole other show, though.
It's a whole other show. But before we start the show, today's show, I want to dedicate to the three fallen first responders, two police officers and a paramedic over in Burnsville, Minnesota, who were tragically killed this past week, trying to save the lives of about 8 children that were being held into a house of a domestic violence. You know, the New York Post just put out a statistic, actually a fact, that over 5,380 officers in 2023 were assaulted, physically assaulted on the streets. Now you wonder why we're not getting police officers to join up and fight crime, and it's because nobody's respecting our police officers anymore. They can't do their job. They're scared to do their job, and it's really frightening for civilians like us who used to be on the job. That our cities are collapsing within because these liberal DAs are allowing repeat offenders back out onto the street to assault our officers, to kill our paramedics, to assault our firefighters. All these guys who are trying to help the communities are being beat up and ridiculed each and every day. And it doesn't seem like the community is out there supporting. Just a small, silent few. Nobody's standing up for our first responders. And I'm going to make a pledge right now. Please, please, please back off first responders. They need us. We need them. Let's not let the inner cities collapse.
Absolutely. If you see a first responder, just say thank you. It's as easy as that. You're in line at your favorite coffee shop, buy them a cup of coffee, buy them dinner, whatever. It's up to us that are out there that support our men and women in uniform to really take a stand so we can turn the tide on what's going on. You know, speaking of turning the tide, we are so blessed to be represented by OBBM network. You guys hear it every week, and we have a huge announcement. They have started the OBBM Network TV, and we are so privileged to be part of moving what is called the Badge of Honor podcast into a visual platform. Now you guys watch, and we live stream. Today we're live streaming all over the place because we now have the ability to do that. So thank you if you're tuning in from Facebook, if you're watching on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on X, on Instagram, on Rumble. It is so awesome. We hope that our messages get out there and we continue to grow. Check out and write down OBBM Network TV on Roku. You can see us and the programming that they are bringing to, it's a conservative TV, frankly, and it's awesome. And they're streaming movies. And so OBBM Network TV, go check it out. And with that, somebody who's no stranger to TV, to media, to podcasts. He's been all over the place. He's had an incredible 30-plus year career in law enforcement. Some fun stuff we're going to talk about, some really serious stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to welcome Gary Edgington to the podcast. Gary, welcome to a Badge of Honor podcast.
Hey, I am so honored to be on your show. I've
Welcome,
watched
Gary.
several of your shows, and you guys are doing some amazing work. And like I've told others, I wish this resource had been available in 1979 and 1980, but we'll get to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you would have to have tuned something in, but certainly not having computer. Well,
Big antennas, the big antenna things.
We had computers, but they were just used for different things.
Well, nobody talked about it. If anybody just talked about it, but nobody even talked about it. But we'll get to that.
Exactly. So
we will definitely get to that.
Gary, just everybody watching and listening tonight, go ahead and just tell everybody about you and your career and
Sure. So, born and raised in Culver City, California, the heart of TV and screenland. My dad was a lifer in the Coast Guard, and then he went to work for the LA County Harbor Patrol, went to the Sheriff's Academy, and did that through most of my growing up period, and became a police explorer and then a cadet at the local police department. And then I got hired in 1979 by Manhattan Beach PD and worked there for a few years, and then lateraled over to Beverly Hills PD and had a lot of fun there, and got my detective blood flowing there because I worked detectives for 3 years, which was really what I really enjoy. I never really dug uniform. I always liked detectives. And so then I went over to the DA's office, and I finally landed at the California Department of Justice as a special agent, then special agent supervisor. I worked organized crime, major narcotics, government corruption, internal affairs, and spent most of my career there in the last 9 years in counter-terrorism, and worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Force from 1999 to 2008 when I retired. So I was terrorism before terrorism was cool. And believe me, there was a big difference pre and post, which we might want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then I decided to take a contracting gig in Iraq and deployed to Iraq as an embedded advisor with the U.S. Army, working counter-IED. And that provided the inspiration for the book, Inside the Wire. And then I worked after that. I came home, had a hip replacement. And then, because I'm an old guy, and then I had to do, I took a job working on the Guantanamo detainee cases in DC for a while. And then I came back and worked for a Long Beach Police Department Office of Counterterrorism. And I was there for several years as the subject matter expert and also analyst. And then my final kind of counterterrorism thing was I worked at U.S. Special Operations Command, doing things that I'll never talk about.
That's a stellar career, man.
Yeah. I want to tell you what Gary hasn't done in his law enforcement career.
Wow.
I was never SWAT.
Oh, okay. Well, there
and
you
I was
go.
never a canine handler. I love dogs.
But you were the original Beverly Hills Cop before it was the Beverly Hills Cop.
You're hearing the music just like I am, John. Right?
I am. I'm seeing Eddie Murphy right now, and the original Beverly Hills Cop.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. Okay, they were shooting the movie at City Hall, and there's only one shot that is of where the police department is located in City Hall in Beverly Hills. Mm-hmm. And it's a very iconic building, has sort of a mission look about it, a tower and everything. And when you see Eddie Murphy getting bailed out and at night, and he walks out of the building, that is City Hall. All that other stuff that they had, the wazoo jails and communication centers and all that stuff, was complete rubbish. We didn't have any of that stuff until after I left. Now they have a state-of-the-art facility, but back then it was built in 1932, and believe me, it showed.
Typewriters. Ribbons.
All kinds of stories. We had bad sewer lines in the detective bureau. We moved. Oh man, it was just not pretty. But it was a great experience, and I loved it. And I got to work on some very, very interesting cases, Billionaire Boys Club case and other things, and it was cool.
Well, we're definitely gonna get into that. We got to take our first break. When we come back, Gary, I want to talk about your dad, because he was very instrumental in you getting into law enforcement in the first place.
Yep.
Let's take our first break. We will be right back, everybody.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical Bill of Rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and our very special guest, Gary Edgington. 30 plus years in law enforcement, stellar career. I wish I had that type of career. And, and I want to say to every young person out there, law enforcement is still the best job in the world. You're making such a difference. You, Gary, have made such a difference in so many lives and impacted so many people. And this is where, everything is built up. But you had a mentor. You had somebody who guided you into this life. Tell us a little bit about your dad.
The old man. There he is right there on that plaque right there. He was my hero without question. He used to take me when he was in the Coast Guard. He used to take me on the Coast Guard cutter that he ran with another chief. And I thought it was like a battleship. It was the coolest thing in the world. Ate in the galley with the guys and all that. I was like a little monkey, just a little guy. But I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So anyway, he hired on at the Marina Del Rey, at Harbor Patrol in Marina Del Rey. And I remember him going to the academy and he was in his mid 30s and they just beat him, and he just kept going. And here's the thing. I don't think I ever remember seeing my father do a push-up. So I doubt he had any prep at all. I don't think he ran. I don't know how he did it. I did all of this prep before I went to the academy, and I don't know how he did it. But anyway, fast forward, I was kind of struggling between which route I wanted to take. Part of me wanted to be a physician and part of me wanted to be a cop. And so obviously I ended up on the cop side. And he encouraged me to become an explorer, to kind of get my feet wet, to see if that's something I really liked. And I did. And
how old were you when you became an explorer? How old is that? Like
I was a senior in high school.
Teenage? Oh,
like
senior
17,
high school.
18, yeah.
17?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 1974. And graduated in 75. Went to the Sheriff's Academy, which is how I got the experience and knew that I better be prepared when I went to the real academy, because they beat us up a little bit too. But so I did that. Then I became a cadet and worked a couple of different. I worked in detectives, which I loved, and patrol, which I did dispatch stuff, which I kind of okay. Working dispatch can be a pressure cooker. It's pretty tough. And then I also worked what we called the I Bureau, which now they call CSI, And so I would go to all kinds of different scenes and take photographs, suicides, homicides, burglaries, whatever. And we would take fingerprints and all that stuff. So I got exposed to all of that stuff. And then in 1979, I got hired by Manhattan Beach PD and went to the academy. And 3 weeks into the academy, I just finished working a night shift at my parent agency, Manhattan Beach PD, which is one of the things you did on the weekends is you spent one weekend night working at your parent agency in patrol or whatever. and we'd handled a couple of really drunk people, and one of them kind of got a little froggy, but nothing happened and all that. And so I came home. My dad was getting ready to go to work. It was a Sunday morning, and we had breakfast, and we talked about the Eula Love shooting, which was a big deal in LA at the time. It involved LAPD officers who shot this woman who threw a 12-inch butcher knife at them. The LA Times naturally reported they were there collecting on a gas company bill, when in actual fact they were investigating assault with a deadly weapon on a gas company employee who was turning off her gas. She hit him in the head with a shovel, which that's assault with a deadly weapon, possibly attempted murder. But of course, the LA Times said they were collecting a gas bill, but what are you going to do about that? So anyway, so then we talked about that. We talked about use of force and all that stuff. And then I went to bed, woke up about 11:30, and the phone rang in the kitchen, and it was one of my dad's pals from the office saying, "Hey, we need you to go to the hospital. Your dad's been hurt." And I said, "Is it serious?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm afraid it is." And so I jumped in my car and hauled ass to the emergency room, and I got to the exterior door, and the LAPD beach patrol officer was standing there waiting for me. And I identified myself, and he said, "Gary, your dad's gone." And of course, I was like, I'm in shock, complete shock. And he said, and then he said, I think God bless him, he was trying to help me. He said, "We just found out that your dad got one shot into him, and that's what killed him." Of course, that's actually not what happened. My dad did get a shot into him, but he didn't even break stride. So anyway, the next week was a living hell of dealing with funerals and telling my mother and my sister. And to this day, that's a memory that is burned into my soul. And going to the funeral home and selecting a casket and all of these things that you do, and then the funeral and after the funeral and all of that. And then back to the academy the following week. I'll tell you something interesting. That week was the first week of The Onion Field that came out. And I not really sure why I did this, but probably intuitively, I knew that I needed to trigger some grief responses. So my girlfriend at the time and I went there and saw the movie. And to this day, if I watch the movie, when the pipes start playing, I just fall apart, completely fall apart. So I go back to the academy, and that was week 3. I had 19 weeks, so 16 weeks later, and 17 weeks later, I graduated, and I was with a field training officer for 3 months. And in that 3-month time period, I handled let me back up and tell you a little bit about the guy who killed my father. He was armed with a buck knife, a 3-inch bladed buck knife. He was a crazy guy who 2 or 3 years before had been arrested for attempted murder on a police officer and a bunch of other people. He picked up he had a lover's quarrel with his friend in Marina del Rey, picked up a rifle and started capping at everybody and everything. And my dad was one of the responding officers, and they took him into custody. The judge said, "Hey, dude, you're too nuts to stand trial, so we're going to send you to the Nut House, a Tuscadero State mental hospital." He spent 18 months there. They gave him a supply of Thorazine. I kid you not, this is the truth. They gave him a supply of Thorazine and told him to self-medicate. And naturally, he stripped of gear, a few months later. And, the rest is history, as they say. My dad was working. He wasn't working on the boats. He was working on a 3-wheel motorcycle, working on the shoreline areas. And he was armed with a Model 15 .38 revolver. The guy approached him and started screaming at him, saying, "You have a gun. Why don't you shoot me?" My dad first probably didn't recognize what was happening, and then quickly did and started backpedaling, but tripped. And as he cleared his weapon out of his holster, he fired a shot at about 8 or 10 yards from the suspect and hit him in the left hip. And the guy jumped on my father and cut his right carotid artery and then basically eviscerated him. and didn't even it picked up my dad's gun. He was so crazy. He picked up my dad's gun, emptied the shells out of it, and started walking through a beach cabana area where all these people are. Of course, my dad bled out very quickly, and he's bleeding, and he's covered my dad's blood too. And so he encounters two responding deputies because somebody picked up the radio on my dad's bike and said, "Officer down, officer needs help." And so two deputies responded, two guys that I, know. And he slashed at them with a knife, and they fired a couple shots at him. And then they went in foot pursuit and shot him and killed him. So through all of this, and what I tell you, and having listened to you guys, and having listened to John Kelly and Delta guys, All Secure podcast, and listening to Pat McNamara and all these guys who have been to town and seen the elephant a million times, I realized somebody should have given me some damn help and talked to me and said something to me and said, I was thinking about it today. I'll bet you nobody got any kind of counseling or help throughout this whole thing, including all these guys who loved my father.
What year was this around?
1979, September
79.
1979. I mean, these guys, they were all very, very tight. It's a tiny little outfit, and they all were really tight. And they all, my dad was one of the old guys, and so they loved him. And I know, I'm sure there was a lot of pain that day, and a lot of scars, and a lot of PTSD, and all these other things that we were not aware of then. Nobody cared about it. Nobody talked about it. But let me get back to what I was going to say. I had two incidents involving crazy guys, what we call 5150s in California, armed with knives. And my training officers in both instances were like, "Oh God, how's Gary going to handle this?" And in both instances, in the second instance, it was really bad. My FTO said to me, he said, "Gary," he said, "I just have a flashlight." We didn't have tasers. We didn't even have CS spray. And this was a naked 18, 19-year-old with a 12-inch butcher knife, terrorizing his family, screaming and then yelling at the top of his lungs at everybody. And he saw us behind a hedge, and he's looking at us. And my training officer said, "Gary," he said, "if he starts coming around this way," he said, "I'm going to try and whack him with this." And he had a streamlight in his hand. Wow. And he said, "But it's going to be up to you to shoot him if we have to." And I'm going, I can still see my 45 in my hand, and I'm going, "Oh crap, this is very real." This is
so that impacted you with your dad. I think it's worth when we come back from our next break, staying on that, knowing that you just said what we do on the podcast, and just exploring that a little bit more. We'll be right back, everybody.
Absolutely.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance you'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, welcome back to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and our special guest, Gary Edgington. Gary, before we took to our last commercial break, you were telling us a heart-wrenching story about your dad, who was killed back in 1979 by somebody who should have been behind bars. We led off this show, and before I even knew this, I know Sam was going, we were looking at each other. These DAs that let these people back out on the street do not see the consequences of their decisions years later when it affects somebody like yourself and your family. In the same way. This guy should have been behind bars. Yeah. He should have been behind bars. He should have never, but that's our justice system. And my heart goes out to you. I'm sitting here listening to your story. When we talk about the mental health aspect of it, and then you had to get triggered by, as you become a cop, Now you are going against a knife-wielding assailant. I can't even imagine what was going through your mind at the time. And back in '79, no mental health, no critical. I don't even think we had critical incident teams.
Yeah.
What was a critical incident?
We didn't even have that back then, right?
Who knows?
Exactly. So, what you did in this 30-year career and starting in the beginning with '79, I commend you for even being here with us today and being as strong as you are, because it takes a lot. And God bless you for being you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for the counseling I received a few years ago, I would not be able to tell this story without a far more dramatic, or emotional, should I say, rendition, because, I mean, when I start talking about it, I definitely feel a tightening in my chest. But before, my voice would break. I wouldn't be able to talk for a second and things like that. And now I can deal with it. I can compartmentalize it to a degree. It never goes away.
No.
It never will go away. But I definitely am much better for having had that assistance. And like I said, the catalyst for seeking that assistance was both from my wife, but also seeing all these other people, who I had tremendous respect for, talking about it and doing it and going, hey, you know what? I've seen a lot of stuff in my life and I'm probably a little screwed up from it. I need to talk to somebody about it,
And you certainly have seen a lot, because first of all, that having your dad pass away the way that he did, being with your FTO, having that scenario, a lot of people would have said, nah, I can't do this. But, you knew in your heart that you were cut out for this profession. And John, right, we talk about it all the time. It's not for everybody. And you know what? If you start a career in law enforcement and it's not, that's okay. That's okay. For those of us that know our lives were made to serve, you started off with Manhattan Beach, and I'm laughing because Manhattan Beach and Beverly Hills. I mean, come on. I've been to Manhattan Beach.
This is not Fort Apache.
White collar crime,
You don't hear about it, except for a lot, partying, drunk people. I'm sure, DUI, that kind of stuff. And then,
oh my God.
And then you get Beverly Hills. We're all hearing the music right now as I say that. And when you got to detectives, you were there. What case do you want to talk about? You were there with OJ. You were there with the big mob case. I mean, it's fascinating, and this is the stuff that I grew up with.
Well, OJ was actually when I was at the DA's office. I was working major narcotics at the DA's office when that thing went down. But at Beverly Hills. Actually, at Beverly Hills was pretty active. I mean, the only time I've ever been shot in my career was at Beverly Hills. And, bombings and murders and armed robberies and all kinds of stuff happened. Or two of our officers got shot. Because of its proximity to other places and the fact that it's so well known and has a reputation for being extremely wealthy, which is an understatement.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Gary, with that power. Mm-hmm. The power that was in Beverly Hills at that time, right? We talk about DAs letting people go. Mm-hmm. How frustrating was it for you guys with such enormous wealth and power? Huh?
Corruption?
Well, because you lock somebody up, and whoever, I know this person, everybody knows somebody. Did you have that same problem in Beverly Hills as we do in New York? And you know what? You can't lock them up, put them back out on the street, the whole bit. How frustrating. I mean, I can't imagine how bad that was.
Well, actually, it wasn't really.
Oh, really?
It really wasn't. I can only think of one case where there was the little stinky hand of corruption may have a little bit of favoritism from the judge to one of his favorite defense attorneys, probably not damaged. I mean, the guy, was found guilty or pled guilty. Actually, he took a plea, but still, it was a case that probably the judge definitely played some games with to a degree. And, but Beverly Hills was an extremely supportive community. I went to Beverly Hills because they were paying a lot more money. It was a much bigger agency. They had newer equipment. They had all kinds of things that Manhattan Beach couldn't have and couldn't afford. And I knew a few people at Beverly Hills, and they said, "Hey, come on over here. It's great. People are great. It's great, blah, blah, blah." And this is all before, things really turned sour. And we actually had a great district attorney's office until recently in LA County, until Gascon got elected. We had a succession of pretty decent DAs who were definitely, there might have been one that was kind of, but for the most part, they were all really good. And they were dedicated to the rule of law and the protection of citizens. But unfortunately now, because of a couple factors in California, beginning with AB 109 and Prop 47, which basically opened the prisons up and opened the county jails up to people who, for people who were quote unquote not convicted of a violent offense, which we all know is like one day it's a violent offense and the next day it's this, or they may have started as a violent offense, but they pled them down to something much more palatable. And then, of course, we had the election of Gascon, and that's a whole other mess. And so they've got a really serious problem, and they've got crime exploding, and they're standing around kind of going, "Well, what happened? I don't know." Well, it's because you're letting all the bad guys out, and that's what they're doing. They do what they do best, which is steal, rob, rape, and murder. And so it's like, hello, it's like pounding your head against the wall and going, "Why is this hurting?" Well, it's hurting because you're pounding your head against the wall, right? Come on. You do dumb stuff, you pay. And this is what's happening, unfortunately, because, businesses close. All these things happen. We all know this. Businesses close and leave, and all of these, and people around leave because they feel unsafe and all this stuff. And whenever it's cyclical, and whenever we have these things, something happens, and then at least it used to happen, and then things change, and then we have 3 strikes, you're out, and all these other things happen, and crime drops dramatically, and we have gang enforcement, and crime drops dramatically. Most of these shootings, most of these things happening, a lot of them are gang related. They're gang beefs or they're drug beefs. And when those people aren't on the street because they're in custody for something else, they're not doing bad things. They're in jail, Right. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, in 30 years though, from 79 to when you retired, you had to see it. You lived that whole stretch of seeing the 80s, the 90s, and coming into a millennial.
Yeah.
Where do you see the pivotal changing point in law enforcement was? Do you have a pivotal point? Okay,
you know what? And that's a perfect spot, because that's the question that I was going to ask. Is like, what stood out to you over the lifetime of your career? We got to take our next break. We're going to answer that question with Gary Edgington when we come right back. Stay tuned, everybody.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with our guest Gary Edgington. Stellar law enforcement career. Lots of history behind you. And I do want to get to your book, but before we took a break, we're talking about that pivotal point in law enforcement that you were able to see going from the the late 70s to the late 90s. So tell us, when do you feel that, man, the tide shifted, or they just keep shifting?
You know what? I would say it probably happened, looking back on it, because I was still living in LA right up until 2020. Um, I would say it happened, thank God, after I retired. And that's when things really got a little dopey. And that's when, I mean, there were incremental things that happened. The consent decree at LAPD was kind of problematic from many angles because of some of the effects that it had on LAPD and their ability to hire qualified people, as opposed to people that were filling quotas. That, I believe, reared its ugly head and bit them in the Rampart scandal. There were people that should not have been hired that got hired, from what I've been told. And that same thing happened, I believe, in Miami with Miami-Dade PD. Years ago, they had a similar situation happen, and so they started hiring all these people, and then they wound up with a situation where they basically formed a gang and were killing drug dealers and throwing their bodies in the swamp. Do you remember that deal? It was on 60 Minutes and all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, this happens.
And NYPD.
And NYPD.
You had a whole class.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. In law enforcement, I mean, really in any walk of life, but especially in law enforcement, because of the tremendous responsibility you have. If you're not careful in your selection, you will pay later. In having worked internal affairs, you will pay later in one way or another. And so it's really important to be very selective in who you bring on and make sure they're trained thoroughly and vetted thoroughly. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And the other thing is, now they need to feel like they can obtain help when they raise their hand and say, look, I've been to one too many homicide scenes. I've seen one too many, you name it, awful things that have happened. And I need to talk to somebody about it. And they need to know that they're not going to get yanked out of their assignment and put on the rubber gun squad sitting at a desk or something else. They're actually going to be, watched after and taken care of and helped. And I think that, that's really an important thing too. And I, unfortunately, now, having listened to some other guys talk about this very situation, I don't believe that many law enforcement administrators, certainly on these big agencies, can be trusted to do the right thing with that kind of with that situation. Many of them don't seem to really. They seem to be more political than they are being concerned with the health and welfare of their officers. And I feel like, if they can trust, if an officer or if a deputy, an officer, or whatever can raise their hand and feel good about it and know that they're protected, then that's great. That's wonderful. And God bless the administration that encourages that. But if they're afraid to, that speaks volumes about the atmosphere of the agency. Truth. And the level of trust.
Yep. And, 9/11 kind of brought a lot of what you're talking about out, because folks that were there, we had one debriefing. We didn't have an outlet. For you, it was, let's go to Joint Terrorism Task Force. You were there pre 9/11. You were commander after 9/11. And then, so you saw the changes there. Then, you decide to retire, but you didn't retire. You went to use your skills to just, hey, I'm going overseas to Iraq. Yeah. And do some really incredibly, you were in the trenches. You were in it with the guys and gals over there. Just kind of give us a brief kind of synopsis of that, because it goes right into the book.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was a weird experience. I'd never been in the service. So basically, here I am thrust with a big army, 10th Mountain Division, IED defeat is what it was called, the IED Defeat Intelligence Cell. And, seeing briefings and, images of our people, blown to shreds basically by IEDs, and, the horrible situations that they're dealing with, and not really having an outlet to speak of. I mean, there was no alcohol. They couldn't drink to, there was no 2.1 or whatever they used to serve the servicemen back in the day. There was none of that. And all they did was smoke and talk. And that's probably not good. And while I was there, one of the things that inspired this book was, not that that really has anything to do with the story as it developed, but there were like three suicides while I was there of soldiers, plus an attempted fragging at another forward operating. And so that inspired me to think about, well, wouldn't it be interesting if a retired gumshoe like me got asked by the Army to help him out with a multi-victim homicide case, like an Agatha Christie 10 Little Indians kind of thing. But since I was a counterterrorism guy, it morphed into a story about counterterrorism, international counterterrorism. And that's the story it is. It is, the title is Outside the Wire, a novel of murder, love, and war. And all three elements, I assure you, are in that story.
Well, you certainly, I think it takes somebody having, a career made up of amazing stories, amazing cases, not only the bad stuff, but the good stuff as well, to write a novel. And I'm waiting for my copy. It's in transit. It didn't get here in time. But it really does. It's a special story. You can read a synopsis about it on many different websites. I want to talk more about why you decided to write the book. We're going to take our last break, and we're going to answer that question. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
To the Health Engineer Show. I'm Cliff the Health Engineer, right here on the Offbeat.
Hi, I'm Larry Cortampa.
Hi, my name is Susan Hamilton, and you're watching Offbeat.
Hi, this is Doreen Milano. Welcome to Big Ideas Small Business, where we will talk to Terry Arjala.
Hey, welcome back to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and our guest, Gary Edgington. And we're going to hear about his book, Outside the Wire. And Sam, you brought up a good thing about asking about why you wrote the book. Before we get into it, I just want to touch on one thing. We're talking about mental health, and that's what this program is all about. And I always say, we always bring up when the music stops, right? When you retired, is that when you started feeling the stress of the job because there was no help on the job?
Well, on retire or retire?
Retire. When you finally ended.
I didn't really understand all of this and what was really at the root of it until just a couple of years ago, just a few years ago. Up until that point, I was kind of like occasionally talking to somebody and but it wasn't really, it was sort of like putting Band-Aids on sucking chest wounds. It wasn't really, it wasn't until just a couple of years ago that I really addressed that specific issue. And actually in my sequel that I'm writing, if I can ever get the thing finished, mental health is a big part of it, because my main character, Rick Sutherland, a retired LAPD detective lieutenant, sees a lot of really bad stuff. And a lot of stuff he's not used to. He's not a cherry boy. He's seen a lot of bad stuff in LA, but this is 1,000 times worse than anything he's seen. And it left an indelible mark on him that he didn't really recognize for a couple of years. And so part of it is going to be, he discovers that he has a problem in a very strange way, and decides to deal with it. And that's a big part of the book. That's a thread that goes through the book, is him dealing with that issue as a retired copper, So, yeah. So,
and when is that book coming out?
I have to finish it.
Okay, so we got Outside the Wire that's available, and
right.
To be determined date for the sequel. And what made you want to add author to your bio?
I actually had dabbled with writing a little bit. I wrote a screenplay 15 years ago or 20 years ago that got optioned, but never produced. And it was a murder mystery set in Beverly Hills. And so I kind of played with it a little bit. But this was like, so I kind of had the bug. I always kind of had the bug to do some creative writing. But when I came back from Iraq, I was sort of on the beach, healing from my hip replacement and then dealing with trying to find another gig and turning down all these crazy gigs overseas in Afghanistan and other places. And so I started writing, and that's how things started, and it took me quite a while to finish the book and then go through the process of getting it published and agents and all that fun stuff. Which
did you find it very cathartic though to write it down? Did you find it very healing to start? A lot of mental health, they'll tell you start journaling. Way to write, getting your feelings out. Did that book have any impact on your mental health as you were writing?
Actually, this one didn't because but the next one does, because I am talking about mental health and I am talking about all these things, and through my character Rick, I am describing things that have happened to me and and the Rick of the first book is the Gary for 30 something years that didn't know what was actually inside of him and wasn't aware of it because he was just a goofball, wasn't, he grew up in a different world.
You were just going assignment to assignment, doing the work that needed to be done, no time to stop.
Exactly. I mean, people ask me several times, why didn't you quit? Why didn't you leave law enforcement after your father was killed? Or these other things happen. It never occurred to me. It just never occurred to me, to do that. And so I think I was just sort of like, I'm a kind of a mission focused kind of guy. I definitely am. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'll never forget standing outside the house after the funeral, talking to one of the guys that was my dad's partners. And he said, Gary, your dad's gone. Now it's up to you. Get him off the street. And I actually put that in the first book. I actually put that line in the first book. There's a chapter called Shots Fired, Officer Down. And that line is in the book because that really obviously I recall it to this day. It had a profound impact on me. So to pick up the mantle, to pick up the
torch.
Exactly.
Do you think that's what kept you going? Do you think those words, those inspirational words, maybe kept you going?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it never left me. And I liked it. I liked catching bad guys. I loved being a detective. I loved knocking on people's doors and surprising them with bad news or, doing a buy bust or whatever, that's why I never liked uniform because because everybody knew who you were. I liked surprise.
Yeah.
Today's a bad day.
Well, I have your website up on the screen. For those of you that are listening on your favorite podcast app, it is GaryEdgingtonAuthor.com. You can go there, read more about Gary. You can get the book there. Gary, where do you live on social media? How can people reach out to you?
Oh God, social media, the bane of my existence. Oh my God. Facebook, I have Gary Edgington. I think it's .9, but Gary Edgington. You'll see the cover of the book as my, whatever they call that, avatar or whatever. Instagram is G Edgington Books. And I have Twitter and I have LinkedIn. I don't do Twitter because people get stupid on Twitter and it just starts this,
it starts
nattering nabobs back and forth stuff. And, but yeah. And, my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And if you happen to be in Charlotte and you're listening to this, it is at Park Road Books. It used to be at Hatchard's bookstore on Piccadilly in London, where my son worked, but it's been sold out. I don't know how, but it did.
Wow, very good. Congratulations.
I was just there a few weeks ago, and I went in the bookstore, and I was like, it's gone. It's sold out. They sold them all. So anyway, but so yeah, that's where it's at. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I'm very, very proud of the reviews I've gotten. Anybody who writes a book, believe me, the work begins after you write the end. That's the real work. And promotion is hell, basically. Yeah. It's the 9th level of hell. Except for doing stuff like this. I was thinking about today, all the wonderful people I've met doing these podcasts. It's just been incredible. You know, it's just, you know, that's been a fantastic thing.
Well, your career and the podcast that you've been on is you know, it's that your stories have impacted a lot. I mean, everybody, wherever Gary is on a podcast or radio, you know, go seek it out, get the book. And we're waiting on the sequel because that would be awesome. Gary Edgington, author.com. And up in the top right, he makes it really easy. You can connect to social media right there. Click on it and follow him. Gary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for spending this tonight with us, sharing your story, sharing the impact that those stories had on you. And thank you for doing the most courageous thing that we can do for ourselves, and that is asking for help when you notice that things weren't right.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you guys, and I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully somebody will hear this and, you know, say, hey, you know, maybe we need to do something. So
absolutely,
we can only hope, right? Take care. Be safe.
All right.
Take care, Gary. Stay blessed.
Yeah.
You too. God bless. Bye.
And Gary Edgington, man, amazing.
I can't wait to get the book. I was like, no, you know me. I'm like, get the book.
I know. And, I'm surprised you didn't have it with you.
You know, with Hayden's football, and there's so much going on, and you know, tomorrow's early voting. We got the politics thing. It is just, it's been nuts. So I can't wait to read it. And you know what? I cannot wait for our show tomorrow, which will air tomorrow on Roku. That's what I understand. Thank you to OBBM Network. Once again, you can go to OBBM Network TV and program your Roku there. And again, if you listen on podcasts, thank you. We're a little bit behind. That's going to get fixed. No problem. We've been on the TV push. We are a Badge of Honor TV and a Badge of Honor podcast all over the place. If you like what we do, just hit that subscribe and that like button. And YouTube has that really cool thing, the bell. And so it'll ring and tell you when we go live. So go ahead and do that for us. You know, we have so many amazing programs coming up. I think we're in Denton on Friday. Next month, we're rolling with a family workshop, and then we're working with our partners up at Our Watch. Just go to badgeofhonor.org. There's events. Click on the calendar. You can find out where we are and what we're doing. And, you know, our event with Our Watch, the equine therapy, that thing, it was very small. We had a limited time, and it was boom, filled really fast. So thank you, Our Watch. Thank you to all the first responders that raised their hand that said, me, I want this. I recognize that I need it. So we're looking forward to seeing you all at the end of March. For everybody that tunes in, you know, these guys right here carry the load. Join our team. I'm going to be putting the stuff up on the events calendar with links. You can join us. If you're in Dallas, we do this Dallas Memorial March. It's Sunday, Monday over Memorial Day weekend. Look for announcements on social media about that. Look on our events page about that. We're in the midst of doing a lot of Zooms and collecting information from Carry the Load. They are an incredible organization, and we are blessed to be nonprofit partners with the Continuum of Care program that they do. And just A1, you know, top of the line folks out there. And so they're a badgeofhonor.org. And, you know, if you want to raise your hand, do the courageous thing like Gary did, and so many of our guests, like John and I have. Reach out to 220.org. Tell them that you saw us, you saw our podcast, you met me, you met John, you listened to Gary, and let them help you unwrap and unpackage the emotions that we attach to the trauma. That to put it in a nutshell, that's what we do. Yeah. We can help you with that. I can work with you. John Edmondson can work with you. Nick, we're here. We hear you. Reach out to all of our first responders. We are praying for you every single day. Thank you for keeping our community safe. For our veterans, thank you for fighting the good fight that allows John and I to do this kind of show every single week and say what we want to say. For all of the active duty personnel across the globe, thank you for keeping our shores safe here at home. John, take us home.
Just once again, keep the officers' families in your prayers who were injured and killed this past week. Thank a first responder when you see him. You don't know how much that's going to mean to just say thank you. All right, that lets them know their why. Don't ever let them forget their why. So that's it. Peace.
See you next week, everybody.
See you, Sam.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.